Are India and China repairing relations as both agree to withdraw from a contested area on their border? After 2 years of hand-to-hand combat, we'll look at the fallout and ask if this conflict is any closer to resolution. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is China and India's border dispute. Even though both India and China have powerful weapons arsenals, they've been mostly using clubs and fists to fight over their disputed Himalayan border. And while tens of thousands of soldiers are withdrawing from the Gulrez hot springs area, they don't do so unscathed. 20 Indian troops and at least 4 Chinese soldiers were killed in clashes 2 years ago. And though things have calmed since, the area has remained a tinderbox in bilateral relations. The question now is whether this withdrawal means any sort of reconciliation. Retired generals have gone on record saying it only takes 2 patrols to accidentally cross paths and spark another fight. And as we can see from this report, there's history to back that up.
For the past couple years, India and China have turned the Gulrez hot springs area of the Ladakh region into a battleground. Now it looks like their armies will transform it into a no-patrolling zone. The two sides, and what's an understatement given all the bloodshed, say a new, recently struck agreement is conducive to peace and tranquility in the border areas. Yet peace and tranquility are very familiar but rarely delivered concepts between these two sides. In 1962, the relationship devolved into a full-scale war over the control of the Himalayan borders. The conflict ended with a unilateral Chinese ceasefire and an informal demarcation called the Line of Actual Control. In 1993, they also signed the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement to avoid another war. It called for the reduction of troops in the area and a promise not to use military force. But in 2019, the status quo suffered a significant blow. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government stripped Kashmir of its autonomy, and China, which controls part of the region, was incensed. At first, a ban on gunfire was respected, and the two sides attempted to settle their differences with clubs, rocks, and even their bare hands. 20 Indian and an unspecified number of Chinese soldiers were killed. But then, for the first time in 45 years, shots were fired. The two nuclear-armed powers accused each other of escalating the situation, and China's foreign ministry warned that the Indian side must not misjudge the current situation and must not underestimate China's firm determination to safeguard our territorial sovereignty. Modi was not deterred and responded with a similar warning to Beijing.
India's integrity and sovereignty is supreme for us, and no one can stop us from defending it. Nobody should have any iota of doubt about this.
Eventually, diplomacy overtook political posturing, but it's important to note that the most recent agreement between India and China is the third of its kind since clashes began a few years ago, and all of the friction points along the 3,800-kilometer border are still unlikely to be resolved.
So why withdraw these troops if it doesn't serve to resolve the underlying conflict? Joining me now to debate that and more are from Beijing, Victor Gao. He is a former Chinese diplomat and a chair professor at Soochow University. From Indore in Madhya Pradesh is Gulrez Sheikh, a former spokesperson for India's ruling BJP and a geopolitical analyst. And from Perth, Australia is Rajat Ganguly. He is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Asian Security and International Affairs. Thanks all so much for being with us. Rajat, let me start with you. What is this withdrawal really about? Does one side stand to benefit more than the other, or is it a win-win at least for the process of starting to resolve this conflict?
Well, my view is that it is probably more of a tactical move, keeping in mind that the SCO meeting is coming up. President Xi is likely to attend with Prime Minister Modi. This creates for good optics. This looks like both sides are giving a little bit, moving away from their forward positions. We are not talking about very large troop numbers, um, but the real issues are still there, and we can debate this because obviously um, any positive move from my position is welcome, but we have to also keep in mind the larger context of a very complex and a very problematic border dispute between India and China.
Mm.
And also, we need to keep in mind very aggressive Chinese, not only military moves, but diplomatic moves, not just against India, but against other neighbors as well. Uh, and you have to put that in the context of, this very blatant aggression by China against India, which has been going on for the past, I would say at least 3-4 years now.
Okay, but it is interesting how you note you think this is kind of stage dressing for the SCO conference kicking off in a few days. Victor Gao, let me get your response to what you just heard.
Well, I'm shocked by your panelist from Australia. I would say any reduction of tension between China and India along their long border will be welcomed and will be very much appreciated by people both in India and in China. Allow me to emphasize that the border disputes between China and India, which do exist, are not created by India and they are not created by China. Who created these border disputes? It was the British India Empire who created all these disputes. And India does not want to really push to the edge of the dispute created by the British India Empire. And I would say China and India, both two largest populations in the world, will do themselves tremendous amount of harm if, for example, they want to resort to arms against each other. War between China and India should not be an option at all. I would even dare to say that the worst enemy for India is not China. The worst enemy for India is really the geography. If you really adopt a minimum sense of military knowledge, how do you really want to see a war for India when they fight from the downhill side to the uphill side? Because the higher elevations along the Himalayas are all occupied by
Okay.
China, and it will be suicidal to consider war against the mighty Himalayas.
Gulrez Sheikh, go ahead.
Any kind of disengagement between the two powerful countries is always a welcome step, and peace is always a welcome thing. But we should not forget that this is just disengagement and not de-escalation, because lots of troops on the both sides are still there. The thing is that near the Gogra spot where the disengagement is going on, the army is there at a distance of 500 meters, so they are moving behind on those lines. But one thing is there that China was treating India like any other country in the South China Sea. And in past 5 years, 2 times they have got a taste of their own medicine. First in 2017 in the Doklam, which is a tri-junction of India, Bhutan, and China. They started construction of road, and it was Indian Army which stopped them. And more than 60 days we were standing eyeball to eyeball, and finally
Okay.
China had to move back. And even now, after 2 years, they have to move back, because now they have understood that this is not an India of 1962. This is an India with a very strong government, very strong will, and definitely they will get egg on their faces. And let me tell you one more thing. Uh, uh, 20 of our boys, they lost their life when hand-to-hand combat was there. But they killed more than 40 Chinese. And I'm not saying this. Voice of America was saying 46, and Russian TASS agency was quoting the number 40 plus. So definitely, whatever the number
Okay.
was there, more than 40 Chinese lost their lives in the same Himalayan peaks about which my Chinese counterpart was talking about.
Okay. Understood, but you have to make me better understand what you mean. If this is not genuine de-escalation in any way, according to you, what is it? What's it for?
See, there are two, three things, ma'am. First thing, China has understood that they cannot bully India, and today's India is not going to be bullied by China. Number two, both Mr. Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping will be meeting on 15th and 16th in Samarkand in the SCO summit. And don't forget that Xi Jinping is moving out of China first time after the COVID, more than after 2 years. So he doesn't want bad optics, because don't forget that in November there will be National People's Congress, which will seal his third term. And if he is not having good optics, that is going to affect the Politburo Standing Committee. And one thing is also there: if any general who loses a battle, not forget war, even a battle, definitely that general has a bad time. And Xi Jinping doesn't want a bad time, particularly when his
Okay.
third term is going to be sealed.
Okay. Rajat Ganguly, I can see you have a comment. I mean, it was a little bit along the lines of what you were explaining at the beginning.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to say a couple of things here very quickly. One is that Chinese scholars, from my experience of doing these things over a number of years, they come here, they come to international platforms, they come to media platforms, and they spread falsehood, they spread propaganda. This guy talked about the British being responsible for creating the border dispute. Well, let me say this:
McMahon
India
line.
actually did. India actually did not have a border with China. India had a border with Tibet.
Yes. With
Okay,
Tibet.
so Chinese occupation of Tibet actually created a India-China border when historically a India-China border actually didn't exist. Um, so let them go first and address the annexation of Tibet. A forceful military annexation of a sovereign country
Of Tibet.
about which nobody did anything, and now they are talking about the India-China line of control, which is
Allow me
Okay.
to
really
mention one thing.
the pot calling the kettle black in a way. So
Let
that's
me,
the
let
first
me
first point.
quick.
No, no. Let me just
I do
quickly
want to give
add a
everybody
second
equal
point.
time. Go ahead.
Of course, of
Very
course.
quickly, please.
My second point is Mr. Xi Jinping needs Mr. Modi's cooperation today desperately. He is under pressure at home. He has got serious problems at home. He's got a real problem with Taiwan and America on the eastern side of China. He is absolutely terrified by the emerging alliances between India and Japan and India and the United States. India and United States will have high mountain war games very very soon around October. All of this is making probably Mr. Jinping nervous, and he wants now desperately a way out. So he's reaching out to Mr. Modi. It's a tactical move. He wants to have this good optic meeting with Mr. Modi in
Hmm.
Tashkent, and this
Allow
is
me
basically
to
Samarkand. Yes.
what
Okay.
mention one
Victor.
point.
Yeah. Let me get Victor in. I know you had a response to several things you heard. Do go ahead.
Uh, Again, I'm shocked by what's said by your panelist in Australia. I hope you will ask the Australian government and any other government in the whole world which country has sovereignty over Tibet. It's China. And China's sovereignty over Tibet did not start in 1956 or 69. It did not start from 1950. It started from the Yuan dynasty. That's the Mongolian dynasty. And ever since the Mongolian dynasty, Tibet has always been part of China. This is history. I hope he can go to a university to really go to the library and dig deep into history and come up with a better, more balanced sense of history about Tibet. That's number one. Number two is that I can assure your audience that no country is as united as China now. No country has put in a more successful fight against COVID-19 as China. China has saved more lives and prevented more people from getting infection from the COVID-19 virus than any other country. You can name India or the United States or Australia, you name it. No country has done better a job in saving more lives than the Chinese government and the Chinese people. Therefore, don't really indulge your fantasy to say that China is
don't
in a shaky mood or President Xi Jinping
don't
is worried about something. No, China
No, but
is not
zero COVID
afraid of
policy has
any
failed.
country in the world.
No,
this is
sir.
Period.
this is your
Sir,
this is
zero
your
COVID
propaganda.
policy
You
has
guys do
failed.
propaganda all the time. This is your propaganda. You do this
Zero COVID
You
propaganda
can
all the
policy
call
has
the
time.
collapsed.
rising sun
And
in
it
the
has
east
also
as
made your
propaganda,
economy collapse
and you
along with it.
cannot still change the fact on the ground. You go back to your
We will
university and do some history study
no no
first.
no
Okay.
No, as per history,
You guys
if the
have a
world
certain
goes
world view
according
of
to
history.
your
That's the
type of
problem.
history,
I think we're getting a
then
real
British
indication from
Empire
this
should be
discussion of how far this actual conflict is from being resolved. Gulrez, if I can come back to you quickly, I need to ask you then
yeah,
specifically about this, because
yeah.
the Indian External Affairs Minister said very recently, in fact, 1 week ago, that, quote, the Asian century will not happen if the two neighbors, China and India, cannot join hands. I mean, coming from the most
This is
official
very
level
much true.
possible, it sounds as
Yes,
if India wants to join hands with China. So how can we reconcile what we're hearing from these panelists here to what the
no.
official line from the Indian government has been, that China and India need to come closer together? What is the
And
Asian century then?
see, and further he added, in when he was quoting what you were saying, he also added that India-China relationship is best served by observing three mutuals, and that is mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interests. And till China doesn't respect the borders, how can there be good relationship between the India and China? See, always maintain, try to maintain good relationship with China or even with Pakistan or any other neighboring country. But if they are aggressive on our borders, then we cannot compromise on that. And let me tell you one thing: why they are aggressive? The, they are having some kind of insecurity, and that insecurity complex is a reason behind their aggression, because these borders where India and China are often in conflict with each other, these are the areas which are basically tri-junction for India, Tibet, as well as Xinjiang,
I need
under
to
the
put
weight of
this other
communism.
angle
So all those things are there.
to Rajat then quickly. The clock is against us, as you know. I mean, Rajat, in the simplest terms, India says it wants to restore the status quo from pre-2020, but China argues that, India derailed that status quo when it revoked Kashmir's autonomy. Is there
Well,
some, go ahead.
well, the answer is yes and no in some senses. I mean, I think what happened with India and China is that ever since Mr. Modi came to power in 2014, the Chinese knew that the old way of managing India is over. This is now an India which is going to be
Yes.
robust. It is going to fight back, and this is not the Congress Party in power anymore. This is the BJP in power, and the old games will not work. The other thing that happened is the abrogation of Article 370, the creation of a separate Union territory of Ladakh, and massive infrastructure, border infrastructure building on the Indian side of the LSA. All of this probably has, spooked the Chinese into thinking that perhaps this Indian government is serious about reclaiming the Aksai chain, which is under illegal Chinese occupation since the 1962 war, which was actually launched by the Chinese. So it was not India which attacked China, it was China which attacked India in 1962. So Aksai chain, which was occupied by China, and through that region that the Chinese have built this Tibet to Xinjiang highway. This highway is strategically vital for them. So they probably felt that the Indians, now that they have abrogated Article 370, they will reclaim the POK, they will reclaim Aksai chain. All of this is militarily probably problematic for them. So which is why perhaps this incident of this aggression on the LSE, preventing the Indian patrols moving up to the forward positions, all of these things have happened.
Okay.
Can we go back? Can we go back to the status quo ante? In fact, today, Mr. Jaishankar actually talked about it. That yes, we should go back to the status quo ante, but that would mean
Yes.
serious disengagement,
Mm.
which hasn't actually happened. So
Gul-
I don't think we need to get too excited about just a little bit of pullback from the forward positions
okay.
in one very small sector. But the real question will be: would the Chinese be willing to pull back from Depsang, which is really what they would like to defend?
Okay, Gulrez, I know you have a comment, but please let me get Victor's response first. Victor, go ahead.
First of all, philosophically, for China and India, for any country which wants to resolve any territorial dispute between these two largest populations in the world, will result in disaster. Therefore, peace and negotiation will be the only right way forward. any scholars or military officers or government officials in India who wants to indulge in the fantasy that they can use war against China, don't forget, India is only 1/5 the size of the Chinese economy. China has a very mighty military on the par with that of the United States. And if India wants to think about war against China, it will be a disaster for the Indian people, because the Indian people need nothing more urgently than peace and development, because this is the right way to get the Indian people out of poverty and onto the right track of rapid industrialization and modernization. Any war with any country, especially against China, will land India in great disaster, especially considering the fact that your worst enemy is not China. Your worst enemy is the Himalayas. How can you really think about scaling the mighty Himalaya to conquer all these mountain peaks in the world? And on top of that, Himalaya will start freezing very soon, no later than October. So if the two military do not disengage from each other, the soldiers will be frozen to death in the Himalayas. Save the soldiers, save the military families. Don't think
your
about
soldiers
war.
as well.
Think about peace.
Let me get to Gulrev. Go ahead.
Think about peace.
See, let me tell you very frankly, a war between India and China today will be mad, MAD, mad. That is, mutually assured destruction will be there for India as well as for China. China won't even be saved because India is also a nuclear power. India is one of the biggest military. India is having one of the biggest military in the world as far as the Himalayas heights are concerned. Don't forget that we are also the guardians of Siachen, which is the highest battlefield in the world, and our troops are practiced for Siachen. So these heights are not a very big thing. I know that there is an attrition of human as well as equipment from both sides as the winters are approaching. But our boys are much more stronger when it comes to fighting in the Himalayas. So Himalaya is not an issue, but yes, definitely a war between India and China will be a mad war, mutually assured destruction, MAD, mad.
Okay, Gulrev, very quickly, I'm going to ask you, there's another angle to all of this in that how closely the United States is actually watching all these developments. I mean, many assume that much of the tension that's been created with China has brought India closer to the United States.
Definitely, India and United States are going closer. They are coming closer by each passing day, and we are partners in Quad. That is a quadrilateral dialogue of four countries: Australia, India, Japan, and United States of America. And we are practicing, doing military practices and other stuff together. Very soon, we will be doing India and US Army will be doing military exercise near Indo-China border as well within a few days' time, within a few months of time. So we are quite close, both the countries. And one thing is there, but still, India is a power which don't require any military foot on ground to save itself. We are having a strong army. It's one of the biggest army in the world, and we can save ourselves from any power.
Okay.
We don't need any military to assist us.
Rajat, I mean, is it a good thing that's being described there, or does it just pit India more strongly against its biggest neighbor?
Well, I'm not even thinking along those lines. I don't think anybody, seriously would consider a no holds barred war between India and China, or for that matter, between China and the United States over Taiwan, or between China and Japan and any other country. My point is simply this: I think the Chinese have realized after 2014 that this is a new India. The military power was always there. The preparation now is at a wartime high. The modern infrastructure that India is building is at a massive pace, and the political will in New Delhi is a different political will. I think it has unnerved not only China, it has also unnerved Pakistan. In Pakistan, nobody could even imagine that India could carry out airstrikes deep inside Pakistan under the nuclear shield, or nuclear umbrella, as we call it.
In
So under
Balakot,
the nuclear
Balakot.
in Balakot, under the nuclear threshold. So whether you have nuclear weapons or not. I mean, if a bloody nose has to be given, it has to be given. And I
Okay.
think
It has to be given.
the political leadership in New Delhi is absolutely prepared to give a blow
And if
if
somebody
required.
is sitting on your throat, then you have to kick them.
Okay, Victor Gao,
We have-
my apologies for not being able to give you a final word here because we are so unfortunately out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd really like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this fascinating discussion. Our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.